Chapter 5
New Game Plus. The next morning, Chiaki woke up with her stomach loudly making complaints about how empty it was. Attempting to push herself up so she could get out of bed proved fruitless. Her arms quaked beneath her, then collapsed. Her second and third tries were no more successful and left her back at square zero, lying on her bed, hungry and unable to do a thing about it. As she was pondering how to solve this, the door opened, and Kamakura-kun stepped inside, a plate of food in his hands. Chiaki's stomach gurgled longingly as the appetizing smell wafted towards her. Unable to lift her upper body, she settled for craning her neck to try and see what was on it. "You will not be able to stand or walk for a while," he stated as he took the chair next to her bed, somehow guessing exactly what she'd been trying to do. He set the plate down on his knees, and the ultimate gamer's mouth watered as the food entered view. He'd brought her the traditional Japanese breakfast of grilled fish, miso soup, and rice. It looked as divine as it smelled. Weeks, at least. At that moment, Chiaki wouldn't have cared if she never walked again. She just wanted that food, and she eagerly reached for it, forgetting that nothing was working like she was used to. Her arm lifted barely a few inches before thumping against the bed. Her fingers twitched, the digits useless, and she let out a frustrated noise. "Your muscles have atrophied during your coma," Kamakura-kun explained as he started slicing the fish. "I did what I could to lessen the effects, but some decay was inevitable. You lack the muscular strength, mobility, and fine motor control for even the most basic of activities, so I will be assisting you." You really don't have to." He cut her off by bringing a piece of salmon to her mouth, clearly expectant. Looking at the chopsticks as they hovered in the air, Chiaki thought about trying to take them, but quickly rejected the idea. It took everything she had to keep her fingers around her hairpin. She'd never managed to hold the utensils. Slowly, trying not to feel guilty about being so helpless he had to do things for her, she murmured her thanks and parted her lips. Her eyes popped open in surprise as the flavors exploded onto her tongue. "Oh my god, he's maxed out cooking!" The salmon was grilled to perfection, drizzled in soy sauce and garnished with daikon. It was as incredible as Hanamura-kun's food, maybe even better. "Did you make this?" she exclaimed, shame forgotten, eagerly opening her mouth and leaning forward for another bite. He placed the next morsel in her mouth, barely withdrawing the chopsticks before she snapped it shut and chewed. "Yes." "It's delicious." The rice and soup were equally as exquisite, and at the end of the meal she leaned back against the pillows with a content sigh. Trying to sit up caused her entire body to tremble, but it felt good to be even a little vertical. She watched Kamakura-kun eat his own portion. Unlike her, he didn't seem to relish the food, mechanically moving it towards his mouth without a change in expression. Minutes ticked by in silence. Now that her belly was satisfied, Chiaki became aware of another pressing need. Fidgeting slightly, she glanced at Kamakura-kun, who had just finished his breakfast. Could you help me get to the bathroom?" She'd been expecting him to offer his shoulder to lean on as she tried to stumble around. What she wasn't prepared for was him to scoop her up effortlessly and set off down the hall. Chiaki gasped in alarm, fingers automatically trying to dig into his shirt for purchase. She could feel the warmth of his skin through his clothes. With his demeanor, she'd almost expected him to be cold. They went down a flight of stairs. He somehow opened what must have been the bathroom door without dropping her. The pink-haired girl barely caught a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror, frightfully thin and pale, before Kamakura-kun carried her past it and set her down on the toilet. She shifted uncomfortably, waiting for him to leave. He did not, and with a hot surge of mortification she realized why. He was going to have to help her. Chiaki refused to look anywhere near Kamakura-kun throughout the process, face burning as she kept her eyes on the ceiling and tried to play Gala Omega in her head. When that embarrassing set of business was over, he brought her back to her room and helped her into a clean nightgown. She did ask for regular clothes, but he informed her that it was easier to do physical therapy in something loose-fitting. At least the gown had a little breast pocket for her to keep her hairpin in. It was also now that she saw her new scars for the first time, staring down at her skin as it was revealed. The 2 jagged scars on her belly looked like they came from surgery, but her eyes ran over the smaller, rounder ones between her breasts and covering her arms and legs in confusion.
What could leave injuries like that? Was I shot? But why keep shooting unless you kept missing my torso? You'd have to have really bad aim for that.
She almost wanted to ask Kamakura-kun about it, but wondered if she was just better off not knowing. There had to be a reason her brain forgot about the event after all. Then, picking her back up, Kamakura-kun brought her back downstairs to start the therapy. It began with him wrapping his long fingers around her forearm and stating only one thing. "Stop me from lifting this." Easy, right? The sort of thing she could do without thinking. But she suddenly couldn't muster up any resistance, and he brought her arm up effortlessly. Chiaki frowned. "Let me try again." The second time she also failed to stop him, and the third, fourth, 10th times. Forget lead, her limbs may as well have been made of butter. They did this for 10 minutes, then went through the whole thing again with her other arm, then both her legs, then shoulder shrugs, which were easier, sitting up for long periods, stretches, squeezing one of those squishy stress balls she'd always privately thought Kuzuryu-kun could have used, and other exercises she wouldn't have even considered. When it was over, she was so tired she just fell right back asleep, right there on the living room floor. She woke up to find a blanket over her and smell food cooking in the kitchen. And so that was how that first week, and she only knew it was a week because Kamakura-kun told her so, went. Chiaki felt like a baby, spending most of her time asleep and needing assistance for everything during her waking moments. Bathing, combing her hair, brushing her teeth, there was nothing she could do alone.
It was depressing to wake up one day and find that she'd gone from functional human being to invalid.
That first day set her schedule. When she woke, Kamakura-kun brought up breakfast from the first floor. After she'd eaten, he helped her go to the bathroom, then changed her into a clean gown and brought her downstairs. In the living room, he would put her through her physical rehab for most of the morning. They'd stop for lunch. Then she spent the afternoon napping while he did whatever he usually did. She'd wake up for dinner, after which there'd be a bit more therapy. Then he brought her back up to get ready for bed. Wash, rinse, repeat. Throughout this, Chiaki got to see the rest of where they were living. It was a typical 5-room house, dining room, kitchen, bathroom, living room, and 2 upstairs bedrooms. While Chiaki did have a wheelchair, it stayed on the first floor. Japanese homes didn't really have room to build ramps from the second floor to the first, so Kamakura-kun carried her up and down the narrow stairs each time. The place was nice, but to her it seemed a bit sad, empty almost. There was a distinct lack of city sounds and smells, and Chiaki guessed they were somewhere in the countryside. She couldn't confirm, though, as there was one thing that set this place apart from a regular house. Kamakura-kun always kept the window curtains shut. At the end of the week, he handed her a Game Girl Advance, and Chiaki almost shrieked in joy. "You are not to neglect your therapy for this," he stated, eyes narrowed as he watched her eagerly flick it on. The prompt for a new game flashed on the screen, which was to be expected. Her old games had probably been sent back to her parents by the academy. "Only play them in your free time, not when you're supposed to be exercising." I will, she promised distractedly, already lost to the wonderful world of Pokemon Emerald. "Thank you so much."
Free time was really only during meals, and the little she could stay awake before succumbing to sleep. But soon enough, her internal clock had reoriented itself, and her hours started to look like a normal person's. Chiaki found that she slept less during the afternoons, and her precious games ate up her little free time. Figuring out how to play with her limited range of movement was a bit of a challenge. She had a hard time holding the console, but she quickly discovered she could play just by resting it on her lap. Stabbing the buttons didn't require much dexterity after all.
While her games did distract her for a while, they didn't prevent her from turning one question over in her mind, namely who Kamakura-kun was. It wasn't that Chiaki didn't trust him, she did. She just didn't know how to start connecting to him. He seemed almost inhuman in how still and quiet he was. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking, so she almost tiptoed around him, while he seemed content to just watch her do so.
When they talked, it was only questions on her end and short, blunt answers on his, or else verbal instructions from him and acknowledgments from her, or those bland, good morning, thank you for the meal exchanges. Chiaki knew she was being selfish. She owed it to Kamakura-kun to know him more. She owed it to Hinata-kun to find out what had happened to him. But she wasn't ready for that yet. It was strange to spend a year wondering, then not want to take the answers once they were in reach. Because she could see how different Kamakura-kun was, and she so did not want dead to mean dead. She existed in a limbo, unable to pretend Kamakura-kun was who she'd known before, yet equally unable to accept Hinata-kun might be gone. It couldn't go on like this forever, she also knew. She could ask other questions, avoid the elephant in the room, but sooner or later she would have to face it. She only hoped she would be strong enough to endure the answers when she asked for them.